Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about what an asset is. Wrong caption, sorry. What is an asset? And the different kinds of assets we can have. Liquid assets, non-liquid assets. I'm going to kind of go a little bit more in depth in what even is an asset. I do find that clients really don't. Some of them are very astute in businesses and others are they just know how to do something and they want to sell it, which is fantastic, but they don't know a lot about how to read a financial statement, which is fine, but to really get a handle and make your business profitable, bringing in lots of money with a positive cash flow, I think it's important to understand at least the basics of accounting and what these topics mean, because you're going to hear about it from your bookkeeper. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this. As always, if you enjoy these videos, please like, share, and subscribe. That is how I get out the word about my channel. Also, feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know what other topics you'd like me to address in future videos. I have kind of a long list of things that I want to talk about, and I'm always happy to do one on request. So just let me know. So here's our first question. What is an asset to begin with? An asset is essentially something that a firm owns, or a family. Most families' biggest asset is their home, but that is, excuse me, my goodness, it's first thing in the morning for me. My voice isn't awake yet, so sorry. An asset is something that you own, something that you can convert to cash, okay? And cash is the king. Cash really is king. It covers what you really need to know the most. We have current assets, which is cash or can be converted into cash within a year. We have cash equivalents, which can be converted to cash within like 3 months. We have long-term assets, which are assets expected to be held over time for longer than a year. And then there's fixed assets, such as land, buildings, things that are going to be used over the long haul. Okay, but today I just want to talk about liquid versus non-liquid. Liquid assets are your current assets, by the way, and the most liquid asset you can have, obviously, is cash. I had a whole class on even what cash is, which I guess it shouldn't have surprised me. But cash is money in the bank. It is obviously folding money that you have in your pocket. It's all of your coinage. It's the money you have in your cash register. It's the money you have in your checking account that you can access immediately. It is also can be money market funds. It can be, well, let me start off by talking about what a liquid asset is. Liquid assets are things that you can convert to cash and use to pay your bills immediately. So when I talk about non-liquid assets, these are things you would have to sell first. So, for example, my car is a non-liquid asset. I can use the equity that I have built in my car, but in order for me to do that, I either have to sell it and somehow dispose of it to get the cash that's invested in it, or I have to take out a loan against it. It's not liquid. I can't take the car and go pay a bill with it, but I can do that with cash. So I've seen businesses that are what we would call cash poor. That means they don't have a lot of liquid assets. Their assets are tied up in a non-liquid form. This can also be bonds, if you're holding long-term bonds that you can't liquidate. Or it could be, basically it's anything. It's going to take some time to convert it to cash. Cash is the most liquid asset. Liquidity, I always think it's interesting that when we talk about cash in a business or funds in a business, we do talk about liquidity, and I've always thought of it as being like a river, and I talked about this yesterday. um, where you can, if you think of the money coming into your business as the flow of water, then the idea of liquidity kind of makes sense. Some of that water is being diverted to pay for real estate, vehicles, office supplies, property, plants, and equipment, um, things that are needed for the business, but you can't sell them easily to pay a bill. So some of that water is kind of being diverted towards that. Some of that water is going straight into your checking account, and it's going out to pay expenses and liability payments. And some of that water remains available for you to use. If you kind of think of it as flowing into a pool that also has an outflow. So some of it will remain in the pool, some of it's going to flow out to pay bills, and you want to make sure that that pool is a reasonable size. There is such a thing as excess cash in a business. We saw this with Apple when they were, well, we're seeing it with Apple now. They're actually buying back their stock because they have excess cash in the business. They're not really spending it on anything. They don't need to have all of this stock floating around, so they're buying it back. And as I was reading this, I thought, well, that's ridiculous. You're in business to make money. How do you have excess cash? But it's cash that they don't need to have these equity stocks floating around, so they're buying it back. Excess cash is really cash that has no immediate use. Okay, it's not going out to pay dividends. It's not being used for operation. It's not being used to pay for R&D. We can take the cash in the business and use it for a lot of things, but if we're not really using it, we're not withdrawing it, it is kind of considered excess. And I'm sure I will talk about that in a later video. You want to have a balance. I used to believe that, well, they do say cash is king, which is true. When things are kind of at crunch time, you want to have cash. We just saw Charming Charlie go out of business, and it really, that stabbed me to the quick because I loved that store. But they went out of business last month because they did not have enough reserve cash. They had 270 stores. They had lots of money tied up in inventory. They had the best selection. I loved that store. That's where I got a lot of my pretty statement necklaces and stuff. But I found out that they had $200 million in liabilities and no cash reserves. You need to have enough cash reserves to pay your bills. They had $6,000 in cash reserves, and I really don't know how that works because that's what you use to pay for your inventory, to pay your trade lines, and I know they had a bunch of trade lines. They had to have the kind of inventory they had. Their stores were amazing, their customer service were amazing. I'd never been in that store without at least 10 other people in it, unless it was some weird time of day when the mall's kind of dead anyway, like 11 o'clock in the morning. Nobody really goes to the mall at that time, but generally if there were people around, they were in Charming Charlie. Fantastic selection. But they didn't keep enough reserve cash. They overextended themselves, and this is where I go back to the cash flows versus liquidity. Their cash flow was poor. I have like one hair hanging like in front of one of my lashes, and it's driving me bonkers. Sorry. They had plenty of stores. They had plenty of inventory turnover. They had And that's what you want. You want to turn over your inventories pretty quickly. They had fantastic customer service. They had overextended themselves on credit. And that's kind of what I talked about in my last video. When I talked about they were profitable, but because they had so much tied up in liabilities, they were cash flow negative. And that's where these non-liquid assets can sometimes be challenging. If you have to close your business, you'll have to sell these off. And these are important. It's important to have the assets that you need to run your business, but you need to be aware of how everything is balanced. So that's just really quick what I wanted to talk about today. Feel free to reach out to me on my website, mysimplebookkeeping.com. This will be changing at some point in the future. I haven't finalized any plans for it yet, but just so you know, this will redirect to a new website at some point in the future, but you'll always be able to reach me here. I would love to be able to talk to you about your business. Feel free to reach out to me and see what we can do to make sure your business is profitable, cash flow positive, and doing what you want it to do. I have kind of found over the course of my degree that I thought this was really super easy and anybody could do it, and I have found that it is very much the opposite. It's very in-depth, very technical, and I have learned a ton. So feel free to reach out to me here. And